Now let's talk about what isn't such a pleasure. There are many fronts on which I would say the Trump administration has declared its war against institutions and values that many of us hold dear. One of them, of course, being immigration. Now, I've heard just through no political sources at all stories of raids in Los Angeles. We know there have been raids in Chicago, that there have been raids in Miami. I'm reading about the Texas migrant community being anxious, uh, and perhaps the letter of the law is, shall we say, not being followed in many of these examples. That's my impression, but to what extent am I wrong?
That is fairly accurate. What's really challenging is that the White House is not giving very much, and Homeland Security is not giving very much information other than, doing it for political gain. So they're posting things to the government's Instagram page. But this is, we remember what the first Trump administration was like. None of this should surprise us. So what we do know right now is that in 9 days, at least as per the White House, in 9 days, the government has arrested 7,400 people. And that is a pretty high rate. And what the White House has done is it's highlighted a few dozen of those immigrants, something like 59 of those, with photographs saying that these are criminals. There are no, the rest of the thousands of people have been picked up and rounded up and are presumably being detained. We know nothing about them. But of course, all of this is for political gain. All of this is for political value, propaganda and PR value to show Trump's constituency that he is enacting the white supremacist agenda that they elected him to enact. And what's also really interesting is it's very easy to say, we're rounding up criminals and removing them. It's hard to kind of argue against that, right? But what you don't hear about is, what do you mean by rounding up criminals? If these are people who are known to be criminals, why are they free in the first place?
Right.
Well, it turns out they're not criminals. They're people with criminal histories, right? That is an entirely different thing. Any one of us could have a criminal history. We could have been convicted. We could have paid a fine. We could have served time. We could have done community service. But if it's on our record, we have a criminal history. By that same standard, Trump has a criminal history. He is an actual felon. And so, if he were to judge himself by the same standards he's judging these immigrants, they're in the same boat. And so most of the people who've been accused of having criminal histories, many of them have simply immigration violations. And then some of them are people connected to serious crimes. Some of them are simply suspected criminals, that they were wanted in this country, but never, in another country, but never tried in this country. So they're suspected criminals. And the rest, who knows? Because the idea of this administration is to arrest first and then ask questions later. Where they're being housed, it's not really clear, but Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has and the Trump administration have floated the idea of putting up to 30,000 arrested migrants in Guantanamo, that no man's land, legally speaking, that the George W. Bush administration used to hold terror suspects who did not get due process, and who for decades were held in the most horrific conditions. And now they want to continue that tradition by putting immigrants into it. We don't know what's going to happen, but it is the idea, the cruelty is the point. The fear is the point, the unknown, us not being able to know anything and know enough details. And so we're terrified. That is the point.
Absolutely. And of course, the confusion is adds to all of that. And the confusion and lack of information it gives them latitude to act in ways that many people might find abhorrent, should find abhorrent, and in many cases are illegal. I was thinking as you were talking, Sonali, about the fact that some people may have criminal records because they were unjustly tried and convicted or accused in their home countries, and they've applied for asylum. Now, uh, we have laws in this country about what happens when someone comes here and applies for asylum. I pretty much doubt those are being followed. And we also have permanent residents. I read one case of someone with permanent residence status being evicted because he was, or being detained rather, because he was either accused of a crime or convicted of a relatively minor crime. Uh, but there again, if someone is going with permanent resident status is going to be evicted from the country, there are procedures to follow. It's
Yeah. And
so
Richard, I have to say that I know people here in Pasadena, where I live, near Altadena, who lost their homes in the Eaton fire and who had so little time to evacuate that they didn't get a chance to grab their passports and their green cards. They're here legally with legal residency. They're terrified. They have applied for replacement cards, but if they get caught
oh,
up in the Trump raids, not only will they have gone through the most horrific trauma of losing their homes, but be unjustly and wrongly deported potentially. And so they are living in fear. And people are showing, the children are not showing up to school because their parents are terrified of being separated from them. That, God forbid these children come home to find their parents being taken away. It is the fear is the point. So yeah, I mean, this whole idea of rounding up dangerous criminals and sending them back home, that is precisely the opposite of what is happening. It is fomenting fear and fomenting fear among a population that keeps the wheels of this unjust economy turning, right? We
right,
rely on cheap, poorly paid, non-unionized, undocumented labor so we can have affordable food to eat and construction of homes. And that should change, but not this way. It's not like Trump is going to say
absolutely.
all of a
Yeah.
sudden, we're going to start paying people fairly.
Well, absolutely. And then there's the problem of misinformation. I was reading about actually in NBC News, they did a good report on their website. They say that ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, as it's called, said it arrested 956 people on Sunday, but an investigation found that they had made close to 1,200 self-described arrests, of which only 613, or roughly half, were considered quote unquote criminal arrests. So among those criminal arrests, as you point out, would be people whose only violation is the manner in which they came to the country. So they're very much misleading the public when they say things like it arrested 956 people, roughly half of them at least, and probably considerably more, were nonviolent offenders, or they were people who crossed the border illegally, which is a civil offense, something
Yes.
you get a fine for. It's not a crime. You have not. So, and then as they say, arrest numbers swelled again the following day. But we're not even being, one of the most totalitarian aspects of this totalitarian seeming act is the misinformation and the cloudy information. And I don't know if that's just incompetence or it's dishonesty or it's designed to instill joy in the MAGA crowd and fear among immigrants. Uh,
Yeah, I think it is. I think that last point is very much
yeah,
the reason for it because I think that the idea is that this is a wielding of power, right? Trump was elected to ensure that he can consolidate the executive power, the power of the government. And he's doing exactly that. Sharing too much information, being transparent, that's not consolidating power. That's sharing power. That's sharing information is power. So the point is um, to essentially give full trust in the executive branch of government. And the other aspect of all of this is that he's also going at it from the legal perspective, right? The first action on his first day in office among the hundreds of executive orders he signed was to revoke birthright citizenship, which is another way of attacking immigrants. It is saying that unless at least one of your parents was born in the United States, you don't get to be a US citizen, even if you're born here. And that's terrifying for a lot of people. So, this is coming from Trump, whose own wife is an immigrant who came to the US under very suspicious circumstances. So,
Would Don Jr. Have American citizenship? Would Trump have American
yeah,
citizenship? I know I wouldn't.
yeah,
So a lot of us
yeah.
would. Uh,
Yeah, and that's the point, right? I mean, this government is trying to make very clear that there is a certain class of people who are in charge and a certain class of people whose job it is to live in fear and they want to create a two-tier society. And I think we have to be really clear about that there's a lot of Trump supporters who are married to immigrants who are worried now about their spouse is being deported and thinking, this isn't what I signed up for. He said he was going to just get rid of the criminals, not my husband or wife. Well, no, he never said he was not gonna that it was just be the criminals. And of course, he told us exactly who he was in his first term. Nobody can claim ignorance anymore of Trump's second term. The other thing is the Democrats, not very loud on this issue. Why?
yeah.
Because Biden spent 4 years doing similar things. Maybe he didn't use as shocking rhetoric as Trump did, but he extended Trump's asylum restrictions. He said he would shut down the border. He and the Democrats tried to one up Republicans on immigration by playing to the fear of, being called not tough enough on immigration. So of course they're not here to defend people. And so we are really at this point where we are on our own, and that's scary, right? We are on our own. We have armies of lawyers who are valiantly working to try to help people stay in the country or not get deported. And the rest of us, we are on our own. And so what's really helpful is people conducting know your rights trainings. This is happening all around the country. And it's crucial because when immigrants know what their rights are, they're less likely to respond to illegal requests by arresting officers. And also unions who are being very, very clear about not allowing ICE agents on their doorsteps. We know here in Southern California, where I'm based, the United Teachers of Los Angeles pushed LAUSD, or I'll take it back. Let me just say it was teachers. It was a teacher-led initiative. I'm not sure if they did it through the union to ensure that those students who were enrolling, their records were not going to be kept on paper when asked for birth certificates,
Mm.
because they didn't want to have records that they could be forced to turn over. And so school districts are, protecting children in this way. So we are on our own. We have to protect one another. And it's, kind of scary.
It's very scary. It's terrifying. And, the only other thing I want to mention in that context is that it seems to me the Trump administration is deliberately also trampling on the sovereign rights of communities. I don't know if sovereign is the right word, but the democratic rights of communities to make decisions for themselves about that community. Three of the cities that have experienced raids in the last several days, New York City, Chicago, and Los Angeles, have declared themselves to be sanctuary cities. And it just doesn't strike me as a coincidence that they are among the first, these largest cities in the country are targeted this way. Now, so is Miami, which is not. But I guess before we go, Sonali, as you said, so many people are being left on their own. But the key here is, I think, mutual aid and self,
Yeah.
as self community based initiatives. And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
it's happening
I,
where you are
it
already.
is. It is. I'd love to share the story of a wonderful organization here that is really leading by example. You know, in the days after the Eaton fire, just after I came back from being evacuated to my home, my yard was filled with debris that had fallen from trees. My streets were entirely covered, and there were groups of volunteers wandering the neighborhoods, cleaning things up for free. They were trained, they were wearing the right equipment, and they were very efficient. And I found out, so they came into my yard and they cleaned it all up for me. And I was so grateful. I found out later on that they were volunteering with the Pasadena Community Job Center, which is the small little storefront in Pasadena on Lake Avenue. I've been there many times to hire migrant workers through a fair process to do tasks in my yard, because the Pasadena Job Center's idea is that instead of having insecure workers who are just waiting at the street corner of Home Depot where they can be taken advantage of by customers who hire them and then don't pay them, you do it through this a formal space, and everyone's treated fairly. The customers are treated fairly. The workers are treated fairly. And this organization is run by the National Day Labor Organizing Network, NDLON, and they pivoted so quickly in the wake of the fires, and they deputized, if you will, or trained groups of volunteers to go around clean up debris. And they are a donation hub now, working with the city with mutual aid, where they're collecting donations and giving them to the community. They're placing an emphasis on immigrant communities because they know how vulnerable they are, but they're helping everybody. And they have their own media. They've got a radio station. They're very active on social media, and they are making themselves so indispensable to this community in a very visible way, which I think is really, really crucial. They're saying, we make this city run, and we are here, and everybody who's been touched by their work here cannot argue in the MAGA way about the importance of immigrants. They're doing Know Your Rights trainings. They are protecting immigrants. And I really want to highlight, look them up online, Pasadena Community Job Center. This is the model for how we need to really think about immigrants who are leading the way, by the way. This is the leadership is immigrant, and the organizing is immigrant. They're very highly organized, and it's a thing of beauty to see.
And I will add, apropos of nothing, that my late mother used to live very close to where they're located, and it's a wonderful community. And this kind of action, this kind of mutual aid and self-oriented initiatives are going to be so even more important in the now and in the years to come. So that's Pasadena Community Job Center. I'll look them up, and I encourage others to do so as well. Thanks for telling us about them, and thanks for, as always, for coming on and enlightening us, Sonali Kolhatkar.
It's my pleasure, Richard. Thank you so much, and see you next week.
We depend on your support here at the Zero Hour, so please give whatever you can at any of the links you see on your screen. Thanks so much.